For 20 years, it was one of the most widely repeated facts in genetics. 1 in 200 men alive today carries the Y-chromosome of Genghis Khan. 16 million direct patrilineal descendants spread across a region stretching from the Pacific coast of China to the Caspian Sea. The claim appeared in textbooks, documentaries, museum exhibits, and newspaper headlines around the world. It felt settled, confirmed, and closed. Then a team in Shanghai proved it was the wrong chromosome all along, and the entire story unraveled. The finding that launched it all came in 2003. A team of 23 geneticists, led by Tatiana Zerjal at Oxford, published a paper in the American Journal of Human Genetics called The Genetic Legacy of the Mongols. They had collected blood samples from more than 40 populations living in and around the former Mongol Empire, testing over a period of 10 years, and buried in the data was something no one had seen before. A single Y-chromosomal lineage, present in 16 different populations across Asia, appeared at an unusually high frequency. About 8% of men in that region carried it, making it roughly 0.5% of the world's male total. The pattern of mutations within the lineage pointed to an origin in Mongolia approximately 1,000 years ago. The team called it the star cluster because of the way its branches radiated outward on a genetic map, like points of light from a single source. The logic for connecting this to Genghis Khan was straightforward and compelling. No ordinary population expansion could have driven a single lineage to such dominance in just a few centuries. It had to be driven by selection. Not biological selection, but social selection. And within the last millennium, only one figure in Central Asian history fit the profile. Genghis Khan, born Temujin around 1162, unified the warring Mongol tribes and forged the largest contiguous land empire in human history. His conquests were characterized by the wholesale slaughter of conquered populations, and his male-line descendants maintained power across Asia for generations. His grandson Kublai Khan reportedly added 30 virgins to his harem each year. His eldest son, Jochi, fathered 40 sons. The dynasty was a reproductive machine, and the Golden Family, as the Khan's bloodline was known, monopolized political and military power for centuries. There was even a geographic clue. The boundary of the Mongol Empire at Genghis Khan's death in 1227 matched the distribution of the star cluster almost exactly, with one exception, the Hazara people of Pakistan. The Hazara lie outside the empire's boundary, but they have a long oral tradition claiming direct male-line descent from Genghis Khan. And a large proportion of Hazara men carry the star cluster. The fit seemed almost too perfect. Geneticist Spencer Wells, one of the paper's co-authors, called it the first documented case where human culture had caused a single genetic lineage to increase to such an enormous extent in just a few hundred years. The claim entered the public imagination and stayed. 16 million descendants. One man's chromosomal fingerprint stamped across a continent. But there was a problem hidden in the method itself, and it would take more than a decade to surface. The original study relied on a technique that, by modern standards, was remarkably blunt. Zerjal's team used 15 Y-chromosome short tandem repeat markers, known as YSTRS. These are repeating sequences of DNA that mutate at known rates, and in 2003, they were the standard tool for tracing patrilineal descent. But they have a serious limitation. They measure mutation patterns, not the full genetic sequence. Two men could share the same YSTR profile and still belong to completely different branches of the human family tree. It is a bit like identifying a suspect by height, weight, and hair color, but never looking at their face. The study also made a logical leap that went largely unquestioned. Nobody had Genghis Khan's DNA. His tomb has never been found. According to legend, his burial party killed everyone they encountered on the 40-day journey to his grave. 1,000 horses were driven over the site to erase all traces, The body was returned to Mongolia for a clandestine burial somewhere in the remote Khenti Mountains, and the location was hidden so effectively that 8 centuries of searching, by armies, archaeologists, and satellites alike, have failed to locate it. Burkhan Khaldun, the sacred mountain where he is believed to rest, is today part of Mongolia's Khan Khenti strictly protected area, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Excavation is forbidden by law and guarded by tradition. So the link between the star cluster and Genghis Khan was always circumstantial. It rested on 3 pillars: the lineage's estimated age, its geographic distribution, and the Hazara connection. For years, that was enough. The story was elegant, the numbers were staggering, and the narrative of a single conqueror whose reproductive legacy echoed across centuries was irresistible. But circumstantial evidence is only as strong as the assumptions underneath it. And nobody was testing those assumptions, partly because the technology to do so didn't yet exist, and partly because no one wanted to. A claim that big, that clean, that quotable, develops its own gravity. It pulls citation after citation into orbit. Challenging it meant challenging a story that the public already loved. In 2012, a study in the Russian Journal of Genetic Genealogy introduced an unexpected finding. Researchers working with the house of Dayan Khan, the northern Yuan ruler who governed Mongolia from 1474 to 1517, tested 7 surviving elders of the royal lineage. Dayan Khan was a direct, well-documented patrilineal descendant of Genghis Khan. If the star cluster truly belonged to the Genghiside bloodline, these men should carry it. They did not. Their Y-chromosome haplogroup was C2C1A1A1M407, a completely different branch of the genetic tree. The first real crack had appeared. But it needed something more to break the consensus open, a comprehensive re-examination using tools the 2003 team never had. That re-examination came in 2018 from Fudan University in Shanghai. Geneticist Li Hongwei and his colleagues undertook what the original study never could. They sequenced entire Y chromosomes, not 15 markers. The full sequence, every base pair, every branching point on the paternal tree. They used the Illumina HiSeq 2000 platform, a next-generation sequencing system capable of reading billions of DNA fragments in a single run. 34 Y chromosome sequences from the star cluster and its closest genetic relatives went through the machine. The data was then cross-referenced against a dataset of 18,210 individuals from 292 populations across Eastern Eurasia, collected over nearly a decade of fieldwork. Where the 2003 study had identified a single cluster, Wei's team resolved it into 36 distinct sublineages and 265 non-private variants. It was the difference between seeing a smear of light and resolving it into individual stars. Before we see what this evidence reveals, if you're finding this investigation as compelling as we think it is, subscribe so you don't miss future stories like this one. The results dismantled the original claim, piece by piece. First, the age. Using whole sequence data, Wei's team recalculated the most recent common ancestor of the star cluster. The original estimate was roughly 1,000 years, placing it neatly in Genghis Khan's era. The new estimate was 2,576 years, with a confidence interval stretching from 1,975 to 3,178. That places the lineage's origin over a millennium before Genghis Khan was born. The star cluster didn't emerge in the 13th century. It was ancient. Second, the distribution. The highest frequencies of the star cluster didn't appear in populations with documented Genghiside ancestry. They appeared in 2 Kazakh populations, the Kare-Abakh at 89.3% and the Kare-Ashmali at 55%. These were ordinary steppe clans, not royal houses. And when Wei's team examined every individual in their dataset who carried the star cluster, not one could trace their genealogy to Genghis Khan. Third, the Dayan result held firm. A direct descendant of Genghis Khan, confirmed by genealogical records stretching back centuries, carries M407, not the star cluster. Two different lineages, two different stories. Wei's team concluded that the star cluster was not the genetic legacy of Genghis Khan. It was one of the founder paternal lineages of all Mongolic-speaking populations, spread by the ordinary expansion of nomadic tribes across the steppe over thousands of years. The Mongol Empire accelerated its dispersal, but the lineage itself predated the empire by centuries. Here is what the evidence shows. The Y-chromosome that 16 million men were told they inherited from Genghis Khan is at least 1,000 years older than the conqueror himself. It belongs to the common Mongol population, not the royal line. Here is what it rules out: random chance, coincidence, and the original attribution. The mismatch between the star cluster and Dayan Khan's documented haplogroup, combined with the revised dating, makes the connection untenable without direct evidence from the Khan's remains. Here is what it implies. The most famous genetic claim of the 21st century was built on an assumption that looked obvious, but was never tested. Social selection was real. The Mongol Empire did reshape the genetics of Central Asia. But the specific lineage chosen as its marker belonged to everyone, not just the conqueror. And yet, the mystery only deepened. Because if the star cluster isn't Genghis Khan's Y chromosome, then what is? The candidates are now multiplying, and each one complicates the picture further. In 2004, 5 graves dating to the Mongol imperial era were excavated at Tavan Tolgoi in eastern Mongolia. The burial goods were unmistakable: gold rings engraved with Siberian falcons, a saddle sheathed in gold with dragon-shaped decoration, ornate headdresses matching those worn by Mongol queens in historical illustrations. A coffin was made of cinnamon wood. Radiocarbon dating placed the remains between 1130 and 1250 CE, squarely within the lifetime of Genghis Khan and his immediate descendants. When researchers extracted DNA from the bones, the males carried Y haplogroup R1b M343, a lineage prevalent not in Central Asia, but in Western Eurasia, not haplogroup C at all. The finding was published in PLOS 1 in 2016 and immediately sparked debate. Were these members of the Khan's family through the strategic marriage alliances, known as Kuda, that Genghis Khan used to bind conquered kingdoms to his bloodline? Were they high-ranking generals from allied tribes? Or had centuries of assumption about what a Mongol royal chromosome should look like pointed genetics in the wrong direction entirely? Then in 2019, another thread. Researchers at Fudan published a study in the Journal of Human Genetics examining the Lu clan of northwestern China, who claim descent from Togon, Genghis Khan's 6th son, and the Toray clan of Kazakhstan, who claim descent from Jochi, the Khan's eldest. Both clans share haplogroup C2b1a1b1 F11756. Their most recent common ancestor lived approximately 1,000 years ago, the right time frame. The fact that two clans, claiming descent from two different sons of Genghis Khan, share the same haplogroup was suggestive. Yet even this connection is contested. A 2020 commentary in the same journal pointed out that the Lu clan's genealogical records were written 400 to 500 years after their supposed ancestor, that key details in those records contradict one another, and that one version even claims descent from Kublai Khan rather than Kulgan. The genetic link exists. The genealogical chain connecting it to Genghis Khan is fragile. So today, the evidence stands like this. At least 4 different Y chromosome lineages have been proposed as the true haplogroup of Genghis Khan. The star cluster, now largely discredited as his personal marker. R1b M343 from the Tavan Tolgoi imperial graves. C2b1a1b1 F11756 from 2 clans claiming separate lines of descent. And C2c1a1a1 M407, carried by the documented descendants of Dayan Khan. Each has supporting evidence. None is definitive. The fundamental problem remains the same one that has confounded researchers for 2 decades. We are trying to identify a single man's genetic signature without that man's DNA. The 2003 study worked backward from population data and a compelling narrative. The 2018 study used vastly superior technology to show that the original inference was wrong. But even whole genome sequencing cannot solve a mystery when the critical sample doesn't exist, and history has conspired to keep it that way. During the Soviet occupation of Mongolia through much of the 20th century, Mongolians were prohibited from even discussing Genghis Khan. Reverence for the conqueror was seen as a threat to communist ideology, a spark that could ignite nationalist uprising. Pilgrimages to his memory were banned. Study of his legacy was suppressed. Decades of genealogical knowledge, oral traditions that might have narrowed the search, were lost to political silence. Only after the fall of communism in Mongolia in the late 1980s did researchers gain access to the region around Burkhan Khaldun. Somewhere beneath the steppe grass and stone of the Khenti Mountains, the bones of the man who built the largest land empire in history still hold their secret. Every living descendant who has been tested points to a different branch of the genetic tree. 4 competing haplogroups. 0 definitive proof. The most widely cited genetic claim of our century has been overturned, and the real answer waits in a grave that was designed 800 years ago to never be opened. If this hidden chapter of genetic history intrigued you, subscribe to follow more stories the evidence is only now revealing. If Genghis Khan's tomb were found tomorrow and his DNA finally sequenced, which of the 4 candidate lineages do you think it would match? And would the answer change how we understand the genetics of conquest?